Good morning. Today is May 27th in the year 2020. We're going to continue our study of Genesis. If you recall, last time we had left poor Joseph in prison for a crime he did not commit. But even there, he had prospered. Today, we will continue the stories of the ups and downs of poor Joseph's life with Genesis chapter 40. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, in case you have forgotten, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were three branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The three branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were three baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. "In 3 days, the three baskets are the 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Be careful what you ask for. You may not like it. Now the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Okay, so again, famous, familiar story. Um, the two officials, probably with more significance and power than simple titles of cupbearer and baker imply. Anyone with that kind of personal access to the king of Egypt was a very important person, probably nobility in themselves, and they have dreams. Joseph interprets their dreams. But the cupbearer, who was supposed to remember Joseph to Pharaoh, did not. And so Joseph continues to languish in prison. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat. They grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came out of the Nile and stood beside them on those river banks. The cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Pharaoh woke up. Just an aside here. Um, when I was a child, very little, I had a red hardcover book that probably was one of my parents, or my mother, most likely. And I vividly remember this story and the painted picture in it of the fat cows and the sleek cow and the skinny cows. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning his mind was troubled. So he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret them for him. And the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. And a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. He told him our dreams, and we interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged." So Pharaoh sent for Joseph. He was quickly brought from the dungeon. He was shaved and changed his clothes. He came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it," Joseph replied to Pharaoh, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer to his desires." I think I'm going to skip the restatement of the dreams to verse 25. Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 good cows are 7 years, 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. 7 lean, ugly cows that come afterward are 7 years. So the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind, they are 7 years of famine. It's just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming through the land of Egypt. 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance of Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. Now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so the country may not be ruined by the famine. This plan seemed good to Pharaoh, to his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. So shall we be put in my place, you shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your authority. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command. Men shouted before him, "Make way!" Thus he was put in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift a hand or foot in all of Egypt." Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphanath-Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potipherah, priest of On, to be his wife, and Joseph went through the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph went out from the Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in the 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sands of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, "It is because God has made me forget all my troubles in all my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end. 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. The famine was severe throughout Egypt, and all the countries came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe in all the world. So the story started when Joseph was 17. So here we are 13 years later, and he has gone from arrogant favored son to wise favored ruler of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. Sometimes it takes time to get where we are going. We don't know the plans God has for us. He promises they are for good, but how often are we willing to be patient to see it? Joseph knew from the beginning what his position would be, but he lacked the wisdom and the circumstance to see it through. And he has this series of ups and downs, of imprisonment and slavery and success and betrayal and imprisonment and betrayal, finally to rise to this ultimate of positions, second most powerful man in the world. Are we willing to be patient? Joseph might have, in prison or somewhere else, thought of a way of working his life to some benefit for himself, and been satisfied with what he had. But instead, in the fullness of God's time, he wound up where he was supposed to be. And there was a reason for it. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" he continued. "I've heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others because he was afraid the harm that might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, for the famine was in the land of Canaan also. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the one who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him, with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. He pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food." Though Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. He remembered his dream about them and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected." "No, no, my lord," they answered. "Your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies." "No," he said to them, "you have come to see where our land is unprotected." But they replied, "Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man, who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more." Joseph said to them, "It is just as I told you. You are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not spies, and as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. And he put them all in custody for 3 days. The third day Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified and that you may not die." This they proceeded to do. They said to one another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life. But we would not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us." Reuben replied, "Did I not tell you? Did I tell you not? Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." They did not realize that Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep, but then turned back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, put each man's silver back in his sack to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done for them, they loaded their grain on the donkeys and left. The place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey. He saw his silver in the mouth of his sack. "My silver has been returned," he said to his brothers. "Here it is in my sack." Their hearts sank, and they turned to each other, trembling, and said, "What is this that God has done to us?" When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. He said, "The man who is Lord over the land spoke harshly to us and treated us as though we were spying on the land. He said to them, 'We are honest men. We are not spies. We were 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in Canaan.' The man who is Lord over the land said to us, 'This is how I will know whether you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for your starving households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, so that I will know you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade in the land.' They were emptying their sacks there, and each man's sack was his pouch of silver. When they and their father saw the money pouches, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, 'You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you want Benjamin. Everything is against me.' Reuben said to his father, 'You may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back.' But Jacob said, 'My son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow.'" But the famine's going to get worse. And very soon they're going to have no choice in the matter but to go back. There's a line that's going to come up. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. It is a very hard thing to see in the face of evil and hardship what good might come out of it. But Joseph, in his patience and in his obedience, will see it. We will probably see it next time. Until then, may God keep you safe, and may you dwell on what God might be doing in your life, even in times of hardship. Amen.